Yeah, Inside Rumble, somebody mentioned we forgot Venezuela. Absolutely, forgot Venezuela big time. Then, you could also add to it the very concept of federalism. I was thinking about it a little bit earlier. I was listening to David's show, and he had a congressional candidate on who had come out of the military and had resisted getting the jabs and so on. And I was thinking about the 10th Amendment Center as well, and people discussing the 10th Amendment, the 9th and 10th Amendments, explicitly saying, and again, I'm an anarchist. I'm just saying, according to their rules, when they say they're going to go into this field of the political world of America, they've got their Constitution, and it has some rules. And it says only what is explicitly granted to Congress are powers. The rest are reserved to the states and the people therein, right? Okay, then you look at the state constitutions and see what those say and so on and so forth, right? Well, I thought about it, and I was thinking about how at the beginning of the week, I was playing Jeffrey Sachs, and we were talking about, he was talking about how the United States and Israel are lawless states. And I said, if we actually etymologically and philosophically break it down, all states are against natural law. So all states are lawless. They're just groups of people coming up with edicts that they call laws. They're just statutes, and they have nothing to do with natural law, because the state can never have anything to do with natural law, because the state only exists by acting in contravention and contradistinction of natural law. It forces you to pay for it, which is a breach of natural law. So it's a non-starter, right? The state is not a supporter of natural rights. But the other thing that gets me is when we start to look at their construct and open up the envelope to the winners of this wonderful award, we start to see that there's a very clear pair of maps inside the envelope. And one of them is the international world, where Jeffrey Sachs says lawless states. And the United States seems to think that it can encroach into all these other areas and tell the people in Iran or the government of Iran what they're going to do regarding their international waters. I mean, their national waters, even though those are their national waters, and the United States would claim national sovereignty over United States waters. But what's good for the goose is not good for the gander, evidently. So you've got the hypocrisy there, where the standards by which they've already agreed don't mean anything. Just like the Constitution, the 9th and 10th Amendments, they will encroach into the states, just like they will encroach into the Middle East. The same thing, the same pervasive attitude. Nothing on paper has held this up. It's just ephemeral cobwebs. They're broken apart with the winds of political heat and breath. That's all. Whatever they want to do. And if they can get the feedback loop of getting people involved who will be part of the payoff scheme, they're all set. And that brings us to the states again and the NDAA. As we mentioned, one of the big ways that they've broken down federalism is with the standing army and attaching the politicians to the bases, attaching the politicians to their need for money and handing things out for education and highway and welfare. You can balance your state budget if you get this Medicare money, all that stuff, right? So they've broken that down there as well. And it really is striking to see. And I think it would be fascinating to be able to be, just imagining talking to a person like Lysander Spooner or someone from that era who was part of the growing sort of questioning of the Constitution and anarchist movement in the United States or around the world. And of course, on last night, we talked about the anarchist principles of a person like Dostoevsky against Imperial Russia. And he could see it becoming even more collectivized in a materialist way as Marxist attitudes were starting to gain traction there. And I do think it's interesting, because I think the lesson that comes out of it for me, again, it reiterates the importance of two things. First, the importance of acknowledging the ethical superiority and validity of the fact that no state can make a claim over you. Second, if they're going to have a state, like Aristotle said, and they're going to have a constitution, then there are two subportions to that. One is the constitutions generally get tossed aside. And whether it's a constitution in the United States or it's international agreements, and they come up with a feedback loop to make sure that future generations can keep pushing it away from where it was originally designed to go. And second, the importance of at least educating younger people and showing them where these people started to stray and for what reasons. And I think if one can see those reasons, whether they're self-interested reasons, for financial reasons, for corporatism, tariffs, feedback loops with banking and pork projects, military-industrial complex, international colonialism, and predation over nation states, plus the feedback loop there with the politicians that they pay wanting to get the power. If we can start to expose these little pockets, I think it's very, very valuable. And it sort of pleases me that many years ago I accepted the idea of anarchism as being the closest to actual respect for my neighbor, because it allows me to look at things like stuff coming from Democracy Now! Or the Gray Zone, which are much more left-wing, and recognize some of these stories about colonialism or corporatism and things like that. Having conversations with Jazz Coleman of Killing Joke. I think many conservatives would think Jazz Coleman is some sort of, evil person, ultra-communist or something like that. But he's much more in line with, where we stand in peace, anti-fascism, anti-corporatism, much more in line of getting the government out of everything, stopping all statism. Very cool stuff. Captain Sensible, very similar, except he believes there should be a social welfare state, that sort of stuff. But the kinds of people you can talk to, and it's amazing. I don't know if you feel the same way. I'll cut it off here, but I do want to mention, years ago, I think I would have had easier conversations with conservative Republicans who felt like they were being ostracized, that their concept of federalism was being disregarded by the climate change people who wanted to control their lives, or the censors who wanted to shut them down when they talked about climate change or the jabs and things like that, and decentralization. And now what do we see? It's not happening, especially when they drive the immigration story at the front of that. It's like the plow at the front of the locomotive. It's just pushing all the snow off so they can keep driving home their bigger government MAGA fascist state. That's a very difficult one, I think, for a lot of the folks who might agree with me on many other issues. It's a difficult one, and I think it makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. But I'll continue talking about it. And again, it is 100% valid and unquestionable that the United States government is not supposed to have anything to do with immigration. But again, it does get people upset when they hear about it. So sometimes I'll just bring it up and just leave it at that, I guess. So let me get into a couple other major items and get into the Bad Attitude Award. Okay. Here is, still on the international front, the Mike Huckabee story. So Mike Huckabee is going to be one of our nominees. Now, I might not play all these cuts, but I'll read you some of the things that these people said. Mike Huckabee is, of course, a big booster of genocide. We, yesterday, forgot to mention this fact. I guess we can mention it pretty much every day. Here's Mohammad Morandi, Professor Morandi over in Iran. What dirt do they have on this monster? He says. Mike Huckabee says, Israel is successful not because of military, economics, or politics, but because God favors it. Now, I could have played this yesterday. This is the one where he said God chose a people, and he chose the Jews. See? Nothing to do with the New Testament, nothing to do with Christ. This guy is not a Christian. If he were a Christian, he would recognize that the new covenant, the new Israel, is not a polis. Israel is composed of the people who recognize Christ as God, the living embodiment of God on earth. It's just ridiculous. He's amazing, this guy.
It is astonishing that a tiny little country of 10 million people outpunches its weight over and over again when it is threatened with its existence by those who have 10 times the population, many more times.
So, first of all, he's claiming that Iran is attacking Israel. Iran has never attacked Israel. Israel repeatedly has worked with the United States to engage in assassinations, bombings, attempts to kill nuclear physicists, attempts to destroy their nuclear energy programs, which could kill a lot of people because of fallout. And Huckabee is claiming that it's the Iranians who are directly threatening Iran's existence. I mean, Israel's existence. Now, the Iranians might say death to Israel, death to the United States. But if it comes to a political world where one's got to exist and the other doesn't, then legitimately, I would hope that historians would recognize Israel is occupying land that belonged to the Palestinians. That the state of Israel, as they currently call it, is illegitimate. And I hope they would recognize that when the Iranians, as many people from Iran have said, say death to the Americans, death to the United States, they mean it in a way of, please end this terrible oppression, this discomfort that is brought to us, this fear and evil that is brought to us. They say, sometimes they'll even say, you know, when they trip over something, oh, death to that thing, right? Now, whether one believes that or they don't believe it, I shouldn't have to be talking about this, and I shouldn't be having to pay that guy's salary to say this stuff about terrorists when my money already went to Hamas directly through the folks in Israel who got my money, thanks to people like that guy when he was in Washington, D.C. as a congressman. So Mike Huckabee already has forced us to pay Hamas when he's talking terrorists through Israel, handing money to Hamas when the leadership was living in Qatar.
Times the military budget, and yet it doesn't just survive, it thrives. So is that what the secret is?
So let me ask you, how does Israel thrive with its socialized economy? If it thrives, then it doesn't need United States money, $3.8 billion a year, or any other support. How is it that a thriving economy can keep demanding stuff from you?
I say to you, no, it's none of that. The secret is that 3,800 years ago, God told Abraham, I'm going to create a people, and you're it. And I'm going to put you in a place, and this is it. And this is going to be your place, and I'm going to give you a purpose.
So we've got the new Reich. We've got the Ubermensch, not the Untermensch. We've got the superior race theory coming from Mike Huckabee speaking to people who came out of Europe, who claimed that they were either persecuted or were descended from people who were persecuted by people who held the same attitude. Talk about a bad attitude. What a vile piece of crap. That man is disgusting. And there's even more, of course. He says that, as we always hear from these born-again Christian Zionists, Mike Huckabee says, Shadow of Ezra, says Christianity would not exist without Judaism. Huckabee says without the Judeo-Christian foundation, there would be no United States of America. My own Christian faith is built on the foundations of Judaism. Had there never been a Judaism, there wouldn't be, you got it, of course, there wouldn't be a United States of America. And he's speaking with John McCain's daughter, and she's just nodding like a bobblehead. Yeah, he says, had there never been a Judaism, there wouldn't have been a Christianity. That coming from him talking to the daughter of the man who worked with Nazis in Ukraine.
My own Christian faith is built on the foundation of Judaism. Had there never been a Judaism, there wouldn't have been a Christianity. And without the Judeo-Christian foundation, there wouldn't be Western civilization, and there would not be an America. My own Christian.
The Old Testament was replaced with the New Testament. You can read the New Testament. You can read the Gospels, Mike. You can read what Christ said. I thought you were a Christian. Then we get Jerry Seinfeld. And this is something I was going to play last night. It's in yesterday's news notes, I believe. I think we put it there, right, Russians? This is just amazing. As he walked out of the Knicks game the night before last out of Madison Square Garden, Jerry Seinfeld the man whose popularity depended on millions of people watching him on NBC, a network that was created by the federal government with the red and the blue networks, he's asked about the Palestinians, the people who are being persecuted by taxes that are being collected from all of these people in the United States, millions of these people who helped make him rich.
That's the order.
Oh, Jerry Seinfeld.
What up, Seinfeld? What up? Can we get a free Palestine? Can we get a free Palestine? Come on, give us one free Palestine.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And, you know, and people have been saying Jerry Seinfeld built up a lot of good cheer from people because they thought he was a funny guy. He didn't do a lot of offensive stuff in his show. Occasionally they would have some stuff that was sort of blue, but it wasn't terrible. It was a pretty funny show. His stand-up comedy routine wasn't filled with swears and so on. And now it's just, you know, to be that cold. You know, I wonder if anybody could invite him to help with a food bank or help me, you know, ask him to donate to some of the kids who've been hurt and survived in Gaza or in Lebanon now or the West Bank. It's just amazing. There's no Palestine. Ilhan Omar responds to this. And so I want to offer this. This is about 2 minutes, but it's worth it.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey, Jerry Seinfeld has said again last night, Palestine doesn't exist. Do you think that's dangerous rhetoric for someone with such a big platform?
I mean, Jerry Seinfeld has been really horrific human being and an example when it comes to talking about the reality of the genocide that Israel has carried out. And I think when people prioritize their own people in the interest of harming others, it's very dangerous. And I don't even think of him as like just a celebrity and someone who has a platform in that danger, but it is dangerous just as a human being to talk the way that he does. It's very disgusting, it's very disturbing, and it's very genocidal language that he uses. And
now, I don't agree with Ilhan Omar, and, you know, I'm just speaking for myself because I'm on the camera, you know, doing the show here, and, you know, have to open it up to you guys if I'm missing anything, so I apologize. But, you know, I think she does make a good point there, and I'm glad that she added at the expense of others, because that opens up the concept of taxation, and Ilhan Omar being very much in favor of taxing people to give money to others and so on. So, you know, she kind of falls off the wagon in many other instances there through the pressures economically on other people and redistribution of wealth. But I will note that her point about pushing and favoring one group of people at the expense of others, and what Jerry Seinfeld had to say, his attitude could be applied to all sorts of people. So again, if he were to say, what Palestinians, right? Then imagine if Jerry Seinfeld were, I don't know, part of the Roosevelt administration during the attacks on Jews before the United States got involved in World War II. And imagine if he were asked, what about the plight of those people, the Jews in Germany? What if he were to say, what Jews? What Jews? There are no Jews. What, you know, this othering of people, as they often say in the left-wing side, this is what Jerry Seinfeld is doing. And I think Ilhan Omar makes a pretty good point. It builds a coldness that hopefully people will recognize it in those other people and not adopt it themselves. And I would like to expand on that to get into the idea that I don't have a place to tell anybody else how they should be valuing their money, whether they earn $100,000 a year more than I do or $10,000 a year. I'm not that person. I can't say for that person what they earn. I shouldn't be telling someone how he should run his business. And Ilhan Omar, I would love if she would be more consistent on that. So this idea of the othering to take advantage of other people for what you think is so important. Taking advantage of other people in any way is wrong. And as she says here, she pointed out that she viewed as it's a painful irony, saying that as a Jewish man whose people suffered through the Holocaust, Seinfeld should recognize the dangers of genocidal rhetoric aimed at wiping out or denying the existence of a whole group. Yeah, that's a pretty good point. And I have a lot of problems with her on a lot of policy things. And, people talk about whether she brought her brother in and all those things. I'm just talking about the point she's making. And I thought that it was worthwhile.